that twice a little bit because I didn't have the stream muted. Classic streamer mistake. Classic.
Happens to the best of us.
Well, hello there, everybody. Happy Monday. Happy 1:30 p.m. Central Time on Monday when we do our Escapist movie podcast live. I am so excited, and I just can't hide it, and I am Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney. I'm about to lose control, and I think I like it.
I'm KC Wosu. I don't know the rest of the lyrics to that song.
Oh!
I wish I could have finished that off.
Look what you're doing to me, Casey. Look what you're doing to me. Oh.
See, I never would have guessed that in 100 tries.
So this week, we're going to talk about two things. One, we're going to talk about the new Mortal Kombat trailer and a little talk into the original Mortal Kombat movie, very early video game adaptation of a movie. I had a ton of fun rewatching it over the weekend. And then we're going to get into Space Sweepers, which hopefully will be an interesting conversation because I know Darren was saying some middling things about it. And I effing loved Space Sweepers. That was exactly my kind of jam. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
So if you were hosting an award ceremony, would it sweep?
First of all, nice. Secondly, movie of the year so far. Absolutely. Movie of the year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm very curious
Very
how
strong
Casey falls on
statement.
this, but let's keep the audience in suspense about where Casey falls on the spectrum here.
Absolutely. But first, let's get into Mortal Kombat talk. Let's see here. Oh, yes. The stream is working for everyone. Hi. Hello. Mortal Kombat, theoretically, one of the easiest video game adaptations to make, as so many kung fu movies are literally just about a karate tournament and everybody goes and fights. Easy peasy. I think one of the hardest things as far as adaptation is concerned is you have a large cast of characters and no specific protagonist. So, in the early movie, they chose
Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, and Johnny Cage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a fighting game in general, you choose your character in a fighting game. There's no hero of the fighting game. There's no hero of Mortal Kombat the video game. Is I guess.
Arguably, there always tends to be at least some kind of default character that they don't kind of express, but everyone gravitates to this character usually because they're the easiest to pick up. In those early Mortal Kombat games, I'm pretty sure that was Liu Kang. I think nowadays it has shifted to Scorpion / Sub-Zero.
Yeah, Sub-Zero I think is the only character to have appeared. Now, obviously, there are two different versions of Sub-Zero because Darren knows things about video games. But apparently, Sub-Zero is the only character to appear in every Mortal Kombat fighting game, I believe. Oh. I think Scorpion is second, but only because he didn't feature in the first edition of Mortal Kombat 3, I believe. Now, I may be wrong on that. I'm willing to be called out in the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either.
No, I'll take it. And so the new Mortal Kombat trailer, I guess we'll start there. We'll start with the trailer and then we'll move on to the original movie. The trailer shows a lot of the same stuff that we've kind of seen in the other movies, which is a quick run through of all the characters, and there's going to be a fighting tournament. It's going to look better because we have better computer graphics nowadays.
And money.
And they have money, and the instead of mystical ninjas, they're saying people with abilities to kind of just borrow from their Marvel brothers over there and just say, yep, people have superpowers, but we're gonna fight kung fu style. That's what we got.
I'm not mad at the take. I know, maybe it's blasphemous to say, oh, they have superhuman abilities, but I'm thinking of it from the perspective of, Sonya, Johnny Cage, they're kind of outsiders to this kind of world. Mm-hmm. And from their, I said Johnny Cage, I meant Jax, but from their perspective, ninja magic, as we have come to know what this is called. Yes. It's a thing that just comes with being really good at martial arts in fantasy stories and whatnot. Yeah. And to them, it's this is some kind of special weapons program or something like that. So it's fine that they say that in the trailer, because that'll also bring in, you know, the casual folks who don't necessarily know about Mortal Kombat outside of the name of it. And it'll get them to pay attention, because it's like, okay, it reminds them of, you know, all those superhero movies and stuff they watch.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing where everything is a superhero movie now. Like, if you remember, like, Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, which I was very disappointed was not a 2-hour exploration of the debates between George Bernard Shaw and, you know, Hobbes as a philosopher, Thomas Hobbes as a philosopher, and turned out to be just some movie about cars and something. I was very, very surprised, caught me off guard. I had not watched any of the trailers. That's entirely on me.
That's on you.
But one of the things that I do remember finding interesting about, like, Hobbs and Shaw is that, like, it is very transparently a superhero movie, to the point where they have Idris Elba literally make himself a super soldier and declare himself Black Superman. And even things like, you look at, say, the Disney movies, you look at, say, the presentation of Elsa, where, you know, she is the Snow Queen from the Hans Christian Andersen kind of story, obviously, but she's also like Frozone from The Incredibles and Iceman from the, you know, X-Men, where she's making ice slides.
Yes.
Yes.
She was born with powers she doesn't understand, and it turns her...
And she's hated and feared because of it.
Well, that's X-Men. That's only X-Men. Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that's the thing when I was watching, like, Mortal Kombat. And again, this isn't necessarily something I feel too strongly about, but something I very much noticed. It's shot in the style of, like, you know, of your X-Men kind of trailer. It's like, oh my God, we're going to have Patrick Stewart going around gathering people who can make fire with their hands, except instead of sending them to, like, a school for gifted youth, he's going to send them to a combat tournament. And I love that way. I love that it's determined by tattoos and birthmarks, or birthmarks that resemble tattoos, and the implication that, like, he's lived with this for about 30 years and nobody's ever gone, you know, it's kind of strange that your birthmark looks exactly like a dragon inside a circle. Doesn't that seem odd to you? I don't know, these things just happen, I guess. But it's
well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, it's just the way things work. He says he goes back to his office job between, like, 22 and 25. But I do love that, like, it's the thing where everything now has to be, like, universe supporting or universe bearing. And you've had, like, interviews with the cast, and they've said, you know, we're not building a Mortal Kombat film, we're building a Mortal Kombat universe. And it feels like you're maybe overselling what you have. Like, and again, I say this, like, Darren, the Grinch on this podcast, loves Mortal Kombat 1995. Just to put that out there. I'm not going to rain on anybody's parade, just so we're clear.
Great.
Yeah, I know. I'm really glad that we now have that out in the open. But I find myself a little bit kind of skeptical of, like, looking at the trailer for HBO Max, and, like, it's not even necessarily that it's, like, darker and grittier and edgier, where you have Sub-Zero, like, breaking Jax's arms off. Because obviously, like, the Mortal Kombat games have always been absurdly graphic. I think, like, Sub-Zero's fatality where he rips out the guy's spine is generally credited as the reason why video games have ratings now, which I kind of love. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely right.
Yeah. But and I think, like, I really liked that web series. Was it Rebirth? Was that what it was called? Remember about 2011 there was, like, a Mortal Kombat web series.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, like, let's do Mortal Kombat but seriously. So I'm not opposed to, like, let's do Mortal Kombat but seriously. But I look at the trailer and it's like, this looks kind of like when they did Hellboy. Remember when they did Hellboy again, and it was like Hellboy, but like Marvel do, but without any of the skill, craft, or technique that Marvel apply to making their movies.
Yeah, that's a lot of the feeling that I'm getting from the trailer, where the other kind of Marvel thing that they have going for them is a lack of identity, you know, like it looks very generic. It kind of looks like an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or it looks a little bit like, I want to say a couple of the shots were taken directly from Winter Soldier. It looks a little bad, you know?
Not bad, just plain, just generic.
Sure.
And it's like, and like, I, as somebody who used to play Mortal Kombat, you know, back on whatever game console it was that I used to play it, or friend's house because my parents wouldn't let me buy it, you know, whatever reason, because I was far too young, little Darren. Like, I remember it being, like, grubby and kind of cheap and a little bit dirty. Like, the thing that I remember about the production of the original Mortal Kombat, it was coded by 4 people. 4 people coded the original version of the video game. And then obviously you had people coming in doing motion capture for the various actions and things like that. And I believe there were only a handful of those as well. And to the point where, like, you know, Scorpion's famous, "Get over here!" I believe that's actually Ed Boon. That's the guy who created the video game because they couldn't pay a voice actor to come in and record that properly. And I love that grubbiness of it. Like, that's that kind of, like, small do-it-yourself aspect.
Like, and the reason that they did motion capture, the reason that Mortal Kombat has its unique look is because they didn't know how to animate. So they took pictures of people and animated those pictures. I think like this, it's so beautiful. Yes, I have very fond memories of playing like the original arcade game. You know, the blood effects, like in a video game, there's blood. This is a huge deal. Absolutely.
I do want to disagree very strongly with the sentiment of the trailer. Like, I get what you're saying about it maybe being plain, like it's run of the mill in terms of it looks like a lot of other things we've seen before. But this is Mortal Kombat we're talking about, guys. Like it's a whole different ball game when you see like a well-realized, you know, in full costume Sub-Zero and Scorpion facing off. Like there's a ton of history and emotion that you can elicit by just putting those two characters on screen together. So like, sure, maybe it's kind of a regular, you know, martial arts movie fight scene.
Yeah.
But it's Mortal Kombat brought to life. And like that by itself is kind of enough for me at least.
Sure.
How do you follow Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Casey?
The second movie? Or...
Yes, when we talk about Mortal Kombat brought to life.
Okay, Mortal Kombat Annihilation is awful. So that's like, there's no getting around that. But I do still love the first movie, and I think the trailer for this new movie, like it actually gets me excited. And and I kind of disagree with you as well, Darren, in terms of the lack of, you know, content for an extended universe. I feel like weirdly enough, Mortal Kombat has like the deep character roster and like the weird. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no! I'm not saying that there isn't like material that you can extend out. I mean, like very famously in 1997, Sub-Zero got his own game, and there've been like spin-off animated movies as well.
That game is not.
No, I know. No, well, we'll talk about like 1997 in terms of like the history of like Mortal Kombat. I suspect when we talk about the original movie in '95, because 1997 was the year Mortal Kombat came down to earth, and it came down pretty hard. Mortal Kombat 4. Sub-Zero solo game.
I like Mortal Kombat 4. Like, okay. I will die on this hill. That was a fine version of Mortal Kombat.
But my argument, I'm not arguing that like Mortal Kombat can't support that, because I think like the characters, like there's a reason that those characters are so loved, and there's a reason when you see video game characters ranked, not just in terms of like Mortal Kombat, you see Scorpion and Sub-Zero ranked incredibly highly in any tournament of video game characters, and I think that makes sense. My argument is more like why the Marvel Cinematic Universe worked is not because, well, you know, it is because they sat down and said, well, you know, a couple of years from now, we'd love to do a giant crossover. But when they were doing that, they sat down and said, yeah, but Iron Man should be really good. And then Thor should also be really good. And Captain America, that should also be really good. And when we've done that, then we have a universe, as opposed to going full scale, like from the start, this is going to be a universe. Because when you get that scale of planning, you end up with things like Man of Steel. And, you know, I mean, you know, Darren says inflaming the comment section.
I feel like I have to disagree with that, because yes, DC screwed up their cinematic universe, but I think it's because they were purposefully trying to rush to get to where Marvel was. And like Warner Brothers, who does have a property that could emulate that same kind of system, they have the Marvel version to emulate, and they have the DC version as a cautionary tale. So like they can probably do like it's Mortal Kombat. It's a fighting game collection of characters. They have to do that first movie that focuses on everyone. Then they can break out individual stories. Because I would love to see a solo Scorpion movie, a solo Sub-Zero movie. Maybe not Sonya and Jax. I don't care about special forces, whatever. But you know, some of these other ninjas,
if it's
I'm down for.
With, you know, super strong robot arms, I want to watch that movie.
Would you get pretty Jax for it?
Yes, I would. Who's the guy? Was it Baraka whose arms turned into swords?
Yeah, Baraka. Yeah.
Yes, the proto Wolverine. Well, he was actually probably a ripoff of Wolverine, but still.
We can't do Wolverine, so instead of swords coming out of his arms will just turn into swords. Beautiful. You know what, Casey? I want to say I am with you 100%. As someone who adores old kung fu movies, who, you know, have the most basic of structures and can support a universe, if you will, I would love to see a solo Sub-Zero movie. I would love to see, you know, Baraka come in as a bad guy in a generic special forces movie, right?
Right. Yeah.
The question is, you know, taking both of your sides here, is are they putting the cart before the horse and trying to build a universe off of this one movie, Or are they just saying, hey, let's make a fun movie and plant a seed? Because that was the real trick that Marvel pulled on everyone, is convincing everyone that the universe existed when really it was one scene in every movie that kind of pointed to a bigger universe. And so if they can learn that lesson, I'm with you 100%. I will be there for every Mortal Kombat movie.
Well, I mean, you say that as if you're not going to be there for every Mortal Kombat movie anyway.
I know, like... I will be. I will be, because they're fun and they're dumb. Make me a fun, dumb fighting movie, and I'm so there. Which might be a really good segue into a fun, dumb fighting movie.
So what you're saying is you'd like to talk about Mortal Kombat 1995, the Paul W.S. Anderson movie.
Okay. It's been a legitimately long time since I've seen this movie. It starts off with the techno song, and I was not mentally prepared for that. Like, you know, I brought the kids over, like, hey, I'm going to watch this old dumb movie. Let's watch this. And all of a sudden, Mortal Kombat!
Before the New Line Cinema logo has assembled itself, you know what you're getting. Like, again, like, this is where, like, Paul W.S. Anderson in recent years has been like reassessed, and there's been a big push to recognize him. I think they call it like the vulgar auteur theory. The idea that, you know, you don't need to be like Fellini or Bertolucci or, you know, Nolan or whoever to be like considered like a director with a strong footprint. You can be somebody like Tony Scott, you can be somebody like Paul Verhoeven, or you could be somebody like Paul W.S. Anderson, the argument goes. And like Anderson's had this kind of big rehabilitation recently where people argued like the Resident Evil movies are massively underrated. I personally think, you know, I come and go on Paul W.S. Anderson. I like Mortal Kombat a lot. I love Event Horizon. And yes, I can't explain it, but I feel an immense affection for the Three Musketeers, but we can talk about that some other time. But the thing about Anderson is that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows exactly what you want him to be doing. And so there are directors who cannot manage as clear a statement of purpose as some random dude yelling Mortal Kombat as a techno dance theme kicks in and the studio logos appear on screen. Like, you know, however you feel about the end result of the movie, there's no getting around the fact that you watching 3 seconds of it let you know what you're in for. That's incredible.
I just want to call attention to how prevalent that song was after that movie launched. Like, there were cheerleading competitions where they would come out to the Mortal Kombat theme. Like, why? Because the song slaps. That's it. The only reason.
Hell yeah. Well, and this was the era of fighting in techno. You know, like, think about, you know, Blade, which was all fighting in techno. We have Mortal Kombat. This was on the cusp of The Matrix, which was all fighting in techno.
And windmill kicks. Don't forget windmill kicks. Windmill kicks were huge in the mid-90s.
That's true.
Like, there are sequences from like Mortal Kombat, Annihilation, and Blade where characters literally just stand like 2 feet apart, which is, you know, very relevant today, obviously, for obvious reasons, and just like kick at each other like spinning tops, failing to hit each other, but do it for like 30 seconds because it looks cool. It's amazing.
It's called capoeira, and it is cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, then now we know that. Yes, no, and yes, no. So Mortal Kombat is a much better movie than you remember if you haven't seen it in a while, is what I will say, because legitimately it's fine. Like, the action sequences are really good. Some of the characters are a little dumb, but that doesn't matter because it's a fighting movie. You're here for the fighting, and some of the action sequences are really, really good. They do an incredibly sloppy job of introducing all of our characters in the first 5 minutes, I feel.
I thought it was actually kind of funny, and I grew to love it over the course of the movie because I'd never realized this before, but in watching it again, every time a character from the games showed up, someone had to immediately tell you who they were. Like, they would find a way to do it. And then in the last third of the movie, when Reptile gets thrown into that, and this is a weird part of the movie I don't even understand. I don't think anyone understands why this happened. But the reptile creature gets thrown inside that little like mummified corpse thing. Yes. And then he becomes like the ninja reptile. just a disembodied voice says a reptile right as that happens, because they had no one to say reptile, so they just threw a random voice at you that said reptile.
Like, this is the genius of like Mortal Kombat 1995. It's like this, and arguably this is the difference between Mortal Kombat 95 and Mortal Kombat Annihilation in 97, right? Mortal Kombat in 95 understands what it feels like to play Mortal Kombat. It understands that the priority of a Mortal Kombat movie is not to replicate the game itself, but to replicate the experience of playing the game. And like being in love with the game and just being in love with how extreme the game is. Like, it understands the priority for the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie is to have Shang Tsung say, "Finish him! Fatality!" That sort of stuff. Like, to actually say the lines from the game. Yes. Or to have like Johnny Cage do the fucking ball breaker. That's your fan service in the original like 1995 Mortal Kombat. Is Johnny Cage ball breaking Goro. Like, that's the big...
Johnny Cage punches Goro in the balls. He does a friendship to Scorpion after the fatality. Like, he gives him the autograph for no reason at all. Like, who knows where he was keeping that headshot?
You know what? I always assumed that Scorpion just had that headshot because Scorpion was a fan of Johnny Cage. I always thought that was a really sad moment where you're like, oh, Scorpion really likes Johnny Cage, but he got killed. That was my reading of that scene.
but that's the priority for it. Like, it understands that, like, and to give an example, like the ball breaker is, and again, sorry to fixate on the ball breaker, but this is like actually important because people talk about like the lore of Mortal Kombat or the mythology of Mortal Kombat, and all that stuff is there, and all that stuff is, people care about it. But like, to give an example, the ball breaker is first of all, Johnny Cage's fatality was the first fatality that was animated in the game. He was the first character, I believe, who was animated in the game, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Secondly, is the ball breaker is, I believe, the only move in the game that actually has a customizable response. It's the only move in the first game where the person that you play it on, their response varies. So you can obviously do it on most of the male characters. He can't do it against Sonya because it's 1995. Am I right? And also, if he does,
because it wouldn't hurt her at all. I mean, come on.
Yeah, obviously it's 95, and it's 4 guys in a room. It's like, what do you think they're going to think about this? And then you also have, obviously have Goro, and he does it on Goro, which he does in the film, but it doesn't. They couldn't animate Goro crushing his balls, so he doesn't actually have a response like the rest of them do. When these 4 lads were designing Mortal Kombat, that was where their brain was at. That was where the priority was. That's what like the goal at making this video game was. And Anderson understands that. And little things like, say, Goro, who, is an animatronic creation, and we could talk about him in a moment. He's fantastic, but he's an old-fashioned, and I think, people watching the movie today might be a little bit, that's very corny and very cheesy. Like, look at the way his lips move when he's talking. And it's like, yes, that's entirely the point, because like the character of Goro in the video games exists because those 4 guys were huge fans of like Harryhausen movies, like the Tales of Sinbad or, Clash of the Titans. And they're like, we want one of those guys in our game. So making a movie version of that is kind of like fantastic as well.
Absolutely.
And like that's what's important. And I think, like, not to get too far off topic, but like Mortal Kombat Annihilation, right? Mortal Kombat Annihilation, what's wrong with Mortal Kombat Annihilation is that it does not understand this idea of what is actually important about Mortal Kombat. And so it tries to do everything. So you get everything. You get animalities in there for some reason. You get like Johnny Cage doing his like CGI kick across the screen in slow motion. You get like all this mythology around various characters. You get a moment where like Sub-Zero creates an ice sculpture of himself and jumps backwards because that's a combo move from the game. You get all these relations to characters that don't really matter because the goal with Annihilation is to cram as much of the game as possible into the runtime without bothering to focus on like what does it actually feel like, what is the joy in making and playing Mortal Kombat. And I think that's what makes Anderson's like 1995 movie so good, is that like it isn't necessarily concerned with being faithful in a literal sense. It's faithful to the experience of it. It's very close to your best time playing Mortal Kombat, as opposed to what Annihilation is, which is what it's like being at your friend's house watching them play Mortal Kombat while you sit in the background and look really sad.
That's a really sweet sentiment, Darren.
I mean, they also had the double problem of the story in the first two Mortal Kombat games, which I think the '95 movie emulates a lot of, is pretty simple. It's the same as all those '80s movies where the hero would just go to a martial arts tournament. Yeah, the story in Mortal Kombat 3, which is where they had to go logically after the first movie, is kind of that crazy. And like there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of brand new characters that are introduced in that version of the game. Like I personally didn't like Mortal Kombat 3 because of that same reason. Like all of a sudden there were like robots. There was a guy who was like a cop. Like he was just a cop. Like I'm like I like it kind of just went into the weeds. Like kind of went right off a cliff in a sense, and then they had to reel stuff back in over time, and the movie kind of just went along with it. So it was kind of it was a miss on all fronts in that regard.
Yeah. And so I suppose like for me thinking about like how actually good the older movie is versus like kind of a little bit how generic the new trailer feels, I just want them to hold on to the action, like the fighting, because in that first movie the fight sequences were legitimately good. They were fun to watch. They were entertaining. It actually got bad as soon as they started implementing too many CG elements, but before that it was usually very good fight sequences.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big arguments about Anderson as a director, and again, sorry to put on my like Duffy film school cap while I talk about Mortal Kombat 95, but what? Yeah, I know, because it's one of the greats. Like, forget like 8.5 or like La Dolce Vita or La Venture. Like Mortal Kombat 95.
I feel like though,
it is important. It's about time people finally realize it.
Recognize it. But like that's the thing. It's like Anderson as a director, if you're picking out like what he's very good at, outside of being the guy who gives you what you want and what he knows you want, he's very good with space. And like when you watch the Mortal Kombat movies, or at least the 95 movie, like the fighting in it is solid. Like you're not going to confuse it with the Raid, like, or anything like that, to be clear. But one of the things that he does really well is he uses props and he uses space and he uses the sets that he has. And like you think of things like again, the fact that it's like a video game, so it's very much like their stage is important. I think of the sequence where Liu Kang fights Sub-Zero, and you like have the camera wandering around the stage beforehand to show you where they're going to fight, as Raiden wanders in with these 2 buckets of water and does his shit-eating grin to the camera, and it's like, yeah, okay. And then we like the 2 characters enter from either side. Again, recreate the use of space is kind of astonishing because it's like a video game. It's like you understand where the characters are in relation to one another. You're going to watch them fight and pummel each other, and you're going to understand the objects that they're going to use as they do so. And I think all of that is really great. By the way, everybody on Mortal Kombat 95 apparently had a really good time. Obviously, again, you talk about like how polished the new one looks. This one was made for $18 million, which was less than the Bridges of Madison County, which I don't believe includes a single CGI reptile or giant claymation monster. Last time I watched it. Yeah, now to be fair, but last time I watched Clint Eastwood's like Melancholy Love Story, those weren't there. But despite that, they spent like a huge amount of that budget went on Christopher Lambert, obviously playing Raiden, which again is another, we know what the audience for this is. We have Highlander. That's our selling point. Highlander.
We have Highlander doing a mostly questionable accent most of the time. The other actors literally roll their eyes at him like on camera. Like,
yeah,
you sure you want to do that, Mr. Lambert?
But like the thing about Lambert, which is fantastic, is that like they had arranged, because of the budget that they had, that they would shoot all of his close-ups in Los Angeles. And then when they moved the rest of the production to Thailand to shoot like the island scenes, they couldn't afford the fee his agent was demanding. So they would shoot like a body double and then cut to close-ups there. Apparently Lambert found out about this, and I love this. He found out about it and he flew to Thailand himself on his own dime and shot the scenes with them there. Not only that, apparently he paid for the wrap party as well, which makes him sound like the most amazing guy ever, right?
Wow.
That almost makes up for the accent, I'm going to say.
No, it really did seem like he especially was having a lot of, like, why was Raiden so funny? Like, I don't understand. Like, there was never any indication from the game that Raiden was like a jokester or whatnot. Like, do you remember the scene where he's giving everyone advice, telling them like what their fears are, how to conquer them? He just walks away after talking to Johnny Cage and Sonya, and then Liu Kang's like, "Hey, what about me?" He's like, "Oh, you." and then gives him advice like he legitimately forgot. Like,
no, he's
like
like
it's hilarious.
He's doing like villain cackling at some points. Where it's just like,
yes.
You know why? Because he's having a lot of fun. Like, yeah, I'll put on this thing, and yeah, I'll do this weird accent that might be ethnic, but it might not be.
Enjoy this, because in about 10 years' time, nobody's going to be able to do this again on a studio production.
Right? It's fun. It's fun, and I forget how good it is. It is questionable as far as like plot structure and the fact that they are doing Mortal Kombat in a tournament that's also called Mortal Kombat. Couldn't you give the tournament a different name, is I guess all I'm saying?
I mean, the other world is literally called Other World, Jack. I feel like you're missing the forest for the trees.
It's because Chad is gonna correct you. It's Outworld, not Otherworld.
Yes.
Okay.
The world, the world that is outside of the Earth is Outworld.
Yes.
But I guess like that's my big caveat, because I do legitimately like this movie. The caveat is it's dumb, but keeping all of the things that Darren has said about Paul W.S. Anderson in mind, it knows it's dumb and it doesn't care. And so I think that's the important aspect. It's like, yeah, we are dumb. We are here to have a good time and fight people. If you are not on board with that, watch a different movie, because this is what we're
Bridges of Madison County is playing across the aisle there. Thank you very much.
Yes, exactly.
I love Bridges of Madison County. But like, yeah, no, that's the thing. And like, what really, really kind of like, again, it's a movie that I have a great deal of affection for, in large part because you read interviews with Paul Anderson, right? And like, again, the fact that he had to choose between making Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Event Horizon, they were originally supposed to open on the same day, August the 1st, 1997, to show you like how parallel that choice was. But you read interviews with him in hindsight, and like, he actually says, and again, I say this as somebody who maybe, doesn't love Paul W.S. Anderson as much as some people have come to love him in recent years. But he says, what happened with Mortal Kombat Annihilation broke my heart to such an extent that it was the reason why I made 7 or 8 Resident Evil movies, because I wasn't going to let that happen again. And part of me is like, oh.
I think like maybe we can dedicate an entire podcast not just to Paul W.S. Anderson, but like the idea of the working director, like just this idea where like that is an art all in itself, is just someone who like doesn't necessarily have a sheen that they put on it, doesn't necessarily put all the artistry into it, but there is a utility to these kind of directors. And now he just makes dumb movies with his wife. How great is that?
He's
right?
the ultimate wife guy. Like, he is the ultimate wife guy, and I kind of adore that about him. Even if I didn't like Monster Hunter, I'm kind of like, well played, Mr. Anderson. Here's to you, Mr. Anderson.
Exactly. And for those asking in chat, you can rent Mortal Kombat 95 on Amazon Prime. That's how I watched it. I rented it for $3. So
yeah, it's the same price on Google Play, on I think a bunch of other like storefronts. It's like $3.
Yeah, it's a
super
cheap rent.
Yeah. And because I'm a completionist, I bought both it and Annihilation for $15, and somehow that was too cheap for Mortal Kombat and far, far, far too expensive for Annihilation.
I had both those movies as VHSs as a kid, and I watched them both like several times. And so while I did recognize that Annihilation was bad, like it was a terrible story, stupid, dumb movie, they killed Johnny Cage like the first minute of that movie. Do you remember that? Like Johnny Cage dies immediately as Annihilation starts. But it still did decent fight scenes. And I was a big, like Jack said, like big fan of just like Kung Fu. Like I love the Power Rangers as a kid. Like if they do fight scenes in it, I'm there. And like Annihilations weren't terrible. It's just everything around that rapper was pretty bad.
The fact that there was nothing but fight scenes, and like the fight scenes weren't great enough to kind of justify like the raid. Like Nightwolf shows up, and again, like one of my favorite moments in Mortal Kombat Annihilation is the moment where like Liu Kang, who has for some reason been able to travel through the planet through a giant ping pong ball, which is a lot to unpack, but the movie's just like, yeah, that's how this works. Apparently, he's been told to look for Nightwolf, and he meets again. We're talking about like insensitive portrayals, a Native American character who literally turns into a wolf in front of him at night and says, "I'm Nightwolf." At which point Liu Kang goes, "If you really are Nightwolf," and I'm like, Liu Kang really isn't the smartest, is he? To be fair. But like again, the problem is that throughout like Annihilation, you just have these like choppy edited fight sequences, and there's nothing going on tying them together. Like Jax's big character arc, which Jax's big character arc in Annihilation is that he has these bionic metal arms, but he has to learn that he doesn't need them because that's a character arc. So at the climax of the movie, he's pummeling a centaur man with these giant metal arms, and it's not working. So he takes off his metal arms and pummels the centaur with his puny human hands. But because he believes in himself, he pummels that centaur hard enough to win. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how character arcs work, Annihilation.
And a worse sin is you don't understand what Mortal Kombat is, because those arms are what makes Jax interesting in the first place.
Yes.
I like to think that like the reason why later adaptations of Jax have him like losing his arms instead of just bionic implants is that so no future Mortal Kombat movie can have that particular character arc.
So that's why the trailer was very, very clear. No. His arms are gone. These are robot arms. You want robot arms? We get that. I love it.
They're staying on for the rest of the movie. By the way, we should very quickly acknowledge, by the way, that like Mortal Kombat 95 hugely influential as well. Like it echoed back in. I believe things like Kano being Australian as well were things that were like first suggested in the 95 movie and then became canon later on as well.
Right. Yeah. I thought about that after the fact. Like, wait, like, because Kano didn't have like he was only in Mortal Kombat 1. He wasn't in Mortal Kombat 2. So like, I'm pretty sure they didn't have like voiced characters then. So that would have been the first time you heard Kano talk. And so they
why is he Australian?
Yeah, like they made that choice to make him Australian in the more recent games where everything is voiced. And those stories are actually pretty good, like better than they have any real right to be, which again gives me like a lot more confidence in a movie version being fairly decent, because the game stories were not bad. Kano was still Australian, so like they clearly there's a lot of reverence for that original movie in the games. Like they brought back Shang Tsung's actor to play Shang Tsung in the game, if you guys remember, in Mortal Kombat 11 at DLC.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
And then they had a combat pack that had the other actors come back as some of like I think Sonya and Liu Kang and whatnot. So like it's hugely influential. Like that. It was a time when people said video game movies all sucked, right? And then Mortal Kombat came out and it didn't. But somehow over time, people seem to have forgotten that Mortal Kombat didn't suck, and it kind of got lumped into that era. So it needs a redemption story.
Well, I think like actually the problem is that like video game movies got better, because like the year before, I think you had Super Mario Brothers, you had Double Dragon the year before as well, and you had Street Fighter. And like that's the holy trinity of like terrible video game movies. And like I would argue a huge problem with all of those is what we discussed already, which is that they put the story ahead of the sensation, in that like they think that like they think that you're gonna watch a Mario Brothers movie invested in the plight of the Mushroom Kingdom, and like that's your angle in, as opposed to I just really like the guy who goes "It's a me, a Mario" while jumping on turtles. That's what the Mario movie should be. Give me that. And I think that as time went on, as video game movies got, more faithful, and I don't want to, they did get better. They absolutely did get better. I don't know that we're at the stage where they're like consistently good, although I think Prince of Persia is very good. Sonic is better than it should be, if we're being honest, if we're going to be frank, but like they're still much better than Super Mario Brothers, Double Dragon, and as much as I love Street Fighter for very different reasons.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like Mortal Kombat probably just got disingenuously lumped in with those, because like, yes, Street Fighter is hilariously bad, Double Dragon is hilariously bad, Super Mario Brothers is legendarily bad, right? And so it's like you have that's a black hole of gravity of video game movies. So even though Mortal Kombat, competent action fighting movie, it gets sucked into that gravity well of, and then
Annihilation basically plugs the hole where it was coming from.
Exactly. And so like people are like, wait a minute, I remember that Mortal Kombat being pretty never mind, exactly. And so it kind of got flattened over, it got glossed over, but now is the time to go back and say, hey, we have a good, yes, it is a good movie. It's not great, it's not perfect, but it is a good, solid movie in Mortal Kombat.
it's highly enjoyable. Like, it's a really, really good time. You sat down to watch this and you had a big grin on your face. I sat down to watch it, I had a big grin on my face. Like, it was just, and again, it took me back to being 12, which is what Mortal Kombat should do. Like, for all the blood and all the violence, it's a very much like if the new Mortal Kombat can take me back to being 12, I will be very, very happy with it. I'm worried that it won't. My big fear is that I'm going to be watching the new Mortal Kombat movie and I'm still going to be 34-year-old Darren or 33-year-old Darren going,
So would you prefer if it tried to replicate the 95 feeling?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to feel like somebody walked into an office and said, I want to make a Mortal Kombat movie. Here's what I want it to be. As opposed to somebody up above said, we want you to make a Mortal Kombat movie and we want a Mortal Kombat universe. And if you can make that happen, that'd be good, you know?
But like, I feel like that's been the sentiment for Mortal Kombat for a while. Because like you mentioned that web series, there was also like a TV show forever ago. I think it was like on the USA Network or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like there has been a bunch of people who wanted to tell a good Mortal Kombat story, like just under the radar. So at some point, since Mortal Kombat is this big franchise in one medium, and now video games are being picked at every which way to be turned into movies, they finally got the green light to give it that kind of treatment. Clearly they're putting money behind it. I do think we might get a decent story, because like there's only like maybe one other fighting game franchise that had anything close to a like coherent story, and Mortal Kombat is by far the best one. So turn that into a competent martial arts movie. Should be easy as cake, right?
The only
you realize we're 26 years after the release of the only good Mortal Kombat movie to this point, KC. I think that makes its own argument, right?
This is the thing, but KC, like, you've hit the nail right on the head here, which is like there are very few video games that are that should be theoretically easier to make into movies, and those are all the Naughty Dog games, because those are basically movies already.
Yeah, they're just movies already.
And so it's like, this is it. This is a movie genre that has been made 100 million times for significantly smaller budgets than this one is going to be made for, that are now classics. You just have to copy what other people have already done, slap some mutants who can make ice on it, and you got a winner. Don't overthink this, man. Blood, fighting, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, go. Like,
I say overthink the hell out of it. Like, get into the deep psychological trauma of Scorpion losing his family, like that deep blood feud between him and Sub-Zero's clan. Like, I want all of that nitty gritty. Like, make it work. Put your heart into that. That's the Mortal Kombat movie I want to see.
I say think about it just enough to balance this whole thing out, because somebody has to Goldilocks this thing. I say, like, hire somebody like Gareth Evans, or somebody who makes like movies like The Raid or whatever.
Ooh, yes.
or somebody who makes, like, again, maybe movies from, again, martial arts movies from overseas, and bring them in and tell them, hey, you've got a budget of, I think adjusted for inflation, 18 million is probably about 50 million today. So tell them you got a budget of $75 million and just make it happen. And whatever you deliver, you deliver. And you have to call one of the characters Liu Kang. And maybe one of them should shoot ice, and maybe be a reptile, but we'll leave that on your hands. You know what you're doing. Trust.
Actually, that's just speaking of The Raid, which is such a fantastic movie. I hope everyone who is a fan of an action movie has seen The Raid. It's so good. It's so fantastic. I just hope, I hope and I wonder if we are going to get sequences like that, where it is someone like Sub-Zero making their way through a bunch of henchmen, and we just get like a really fun hallway side-scrolling action sequence where we get to show off their powers. We got one sequence like that within 95's Mortal Kombat where our three heroes are just facing off against a couple henchmen, and that was a really fun sequence.
Yeah. There was like a random bowling pins knocking down sound effect in the middle of that fight. You remember? Yeah. I'm like, what? You guys were just doing whatever you wanted.
I'm sorry.
Why would you
they
put
were
that
having
in this movie?
fun.
Again, $18 million budget. You can do whatever you want when you're making a movie for $18 million. The studio head doesn't even know that you exist if you're operating at that level. You can get away with anything. Like, the really scary thing is that Annihilation cost $30 million. It got a $12 million bump up between the two movies, and somehow looks spectacularly cheaper. Because again, actual craft and technique, as you pointed out. The fact that like you need to know how to direct a movie. Incidentally, the guy who directed Annihilation ended up directing Annabelle a couple of years later, which was part of the first R-rated cinematic universe, or one of the first R-rated cinematic universes, the Conjureverse.
Yeah. Speaking of, I was just looking
How's
up
that
really
going?
quick. How's that going?
Apparently this, I would argue the Conjuring universe is the second most successful shared universe, like in mainstream cinema.
It's hugely popular. Yeah.
It is hugely popular.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily like a huge endorsement of the Conjuring verse, more a comment on like how difficult it has been for literally everybody else to emulate Marvel.
Well, I was quickly looking up who is directing the new Mortal Kombat movie. Simon McQuaid, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This Mortal Kombat seems to be his first feature-length film. It's not filling me with a ton of confidence. In fact, his only other credit as a director is from 2014. That is a video short called The Nighttime Economy. And
punches.
What?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how you would connect that. Maybe it's the nighttime economy.
He literally has,
or the fight time economy.
Ooh, nice. This
should have done that first. Sorry, apologies.
This person has 2 credits to their name under their entire filmography: writing, producing. He is producing Mortal Kombat and directing the new Mortal Kombat. So that doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence, I will say that to you.
To be fair, James Wan is again producing it, and Wan is obviously, again, architect of the Conjuring verse as well, which is very lucrative from Warner Brothers' point of view. He directed Aquaman as well. He's done a Fast and Furious movie as well. Mm-hmm. I think he did one of the good later ones, one of the ones I actually really liked. I really like Wan as a director. Mm-hmm. He seems to be the talent, or the kind of the vision, the guy that Warner said, can you fix this for us? Mm-hmm. And he said, yep, that's the guy. And I kind of, that can or can't work out. Mm-hmm. Darren's going to avoid alluding to Man of Steel again, but we can all think it really loudly. But yeah, like, it can work out. Maybe Juan met with him, or maybe Juan has seen his work before and trusts him. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, to be fair, Juan is a good enough director at doing this sort of thing that I'm not out.
I enjoy all of his movies. Unironically, I really enjoy Aquaman. He did not Into the Dark. What was the third Star Trek? Right? He did Beyond.
No, that's Justin Lin. That's Justin Lin you're thinking of, that, and that's Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, he did Furious 7. Yeah, no, don't worry. It's because Lin and Juan traded Fast and Furious movies, because I think they alternate. No, they did. They alternated, and then like and like I will remember one of Darren has like a little folder in his heart of like Darren's biggest Hollywood disappointments, and there are things that nobody else cares about. But it's like F. Gary Gray directed the 8th Fast and Furious movie called Fate of the Furious. Mm-hmm. And I'm really disappointed that it wasn't directed by F. Gary Great. Yeah, because 8, great. Instead of Gray, great. That's one of my big takeaways in Hollywood disappointments. Can we get a drum roll or something? Okay.
Hold on.
No,
wait, can I get it?
We will not sanction a drum roll.
Wait. Here's what I have. You guys won't hear this, but the stream will. Or maybe you will hear. Oh, that's right.
I kind of heard it.
I just barely.
You just something. Barely heard it. Hold on, wait. Now the stream will hear it. Because I have a sound effect board right here. Yes, I have a sound effect board right here just for such moments, and I'm shocked that I don't use it more during these streams. Okay, let's take a moment. I thought Jack was patting a silent one. What does that mean, Nick? Is that a euphemism for fart?
Oh,
I think he was saying that you were a fart machine, providing a nice segue into the next movie that we're going to talk about.
That's right. I am so excited. Let's take a little bit of moment here, see if chat has anything to add about Mortal Kombat before we move into Space Sweepers. I like patting a silent one as a euphemism for fart, because that assumes
it does make sense.
Like it's going into your pants, into the padding of your pants. That kind of makes sense, Nick.
Wait, why do your pants have padding? I thought you would have said chair.
Oh, I suppose that makes sense too. I cloth padding. I wear, I wear padded backside to my pants to give me a more voluptuous posterior, perhaps. I don't know. We all do what we do.
The vanity.
I wear the vanity pants. I wear like what do you call I wear Spanx and I wear vanity pants every single day. It's like a hug from your clothes. Let's see here. Yes, no, Nick, I know you fucked up the joke. That's why I'm poking at you, by the way. All right, let's not a ton to add there about Mortal Kombat. The button there is good movie. Overall, very good movie. Really excited to rewatch that and share the joy that was the techno theme song with my family. Let's move on to Space Sweepers, which is a movie that I remember hearing a lot about when it was first being released, and then not a ton of people have been talking about it. I got a chance to watch it last night, and let me tell you, it is exactly my kind of movie. It is incredibly anime, but live action. It is, not post-apocalyptic. It is like,
dystopian.
Ooh, dystopian.
Yeah,
Yes.
like future dystopia. Yeah.
Future dystopian, working class space ship captains and crews, big themes. There was, I was mostly sold on it. And then later in the movie, there is a sequence in which a sentient robot is hook-shotting himself from spaceship to spaceship. And I said, yep, I love it. He was throwing a harpoon, reeling himself from spaceship to spaceship. Exactly my kind of movie. So much fun. Could have used maybe a little edit, a little long here and there. But that's my take on it. What did you all think of Space Sweepers?
I watched Darren's In the Frame, and I wasn't sure what he would think of it because I was thinking I was missing something, that he would even give it the attention to do it in the frame on it. But overall, I'm surprised you also picked up on that, Jack, that it felt very anime. Like, I got the same vibe, and like I liked everything about that vibe, but it felt like the kind of anime adaptation that we often get where they leave out a ton of story and a ton of nuance, and that there is an interesting story and an interesting world buried in there, and they skim over all of it for like the flashy visuals. And so I was ultimately very disappointed in what that turned out to be. Like I even looked up if it was born from some other source material. All I could find, I guess, they created a comic run for the movie. It just happened to come out before the movie did. But yeah, this was just a thing that was specifically made to be a movie, and they didn't bother to tell you the whole story that must exist, because there's gaping holes in just what the hell they tell you in this Netflix movie.
I hear that criticism. I feel like they gave us too much information. I will be quite honest with you. I feel like a lot of like the character development we can figure out through context clues, but the movie actually stops the movie like midway through so the robot can have a little exposition scene about all of the character motivations, which really were not needed.
And not only that, like absurdly overcomplicated character motivations as well. It's not enough that your protagonist lost a child that he's trying to recover from the void of space, which would be enough character motivation in a movie like this. No. He also has to be the bestest Marine that ever was. And, that's not enough. No. He also has to have a personal attachment to Richard Armitage, even though he only shares a single scene in which he's in the same physical space as him at the climax of the movie. But we also have to get that in there as well. And it feels so much like, again, I'm kind of like more Jack here than kind of KC, where there's just too much being crammed in. It's like, take some of this stuff out, and I think maybe KC has a point, let the rest of it breathe a little bit. Like, where you have to stop the movie and explain everything over and over and over again really kind of kills the momentum for me. And I really liked parts of it. I liked that it was like a big live action cartoon. I love that it was bright. I love that it was colorful. I love that the CGI wasn't necessarily trying to be photorealistic or convincing. I'm kind of, I don't know enough about anime to say that it feels like anime, but like what little anime I've seen, it does feel quite like that. And again, I'm worried about like lumping all of like Asian blockbuster crowd pleasing cinema into the same space. But it reminds me a lot. This is South Korea's first space blockbuster, or at least that's how it's being marketed. And it reminds me a lot of similar blockbusters I've seen from obviously neighbors, China. Films like, say, The Wandering Earth, for example, or A Writer's Odyssey, where it's like, when you went back to like 80s American blockbusters and they were like blockbusters on steroids, they were just loud and dumb and like very, very aggressive. And it feels like, we got like comic book movies and shared universes out of those. That's the evolutionary line that we got like in the Western world, where it's like, okay, now we're going to have mythology and we're going to have people in glass boxes, and that's what we're going to do now. That's how we're going to advance this kind of mode of storytelling. But it looks like you go to Asia, and again, I'm worried about like generalizing, and I apologize for this, but you look at movies like, say, The Wandering Earth, you look at movies like A Writer's Odyssey, you look at movies like this, and it's like, no. You thought 80s American blockbusters were on steroids. Let's just amp that up a bit more. Let's see if we can get a little bit more in there.
And what's the problem? And what's the problem, Darren? What's the problem? That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I know. It feels like the celluloid is about to rip at various points because it cannot contain what it's holding. And like,
I do think that is the biggest problem, is that it can't fit all of its story in. At some point, I do believe this was a script, or it was some sort of medium that fleshed out a lot more than what we got. Like, I have to believe that, because the fact that they even bothered to try and give you all the details about these characters, the fact that the bad guy is who he is, like, why is he turning into like a Red Hulk randomly? Like, right? They don't ever tell us, but clearly that was for a purpose, that it had to be in the movie.
And I love the moment at the end where, like, as the ship's blowing up, you get the slow motion, like, intense close up on his face, and he's like, "Oh no, but I did everything perfect." Voiceover in his head. And it's like, we've never had anything like this. There's no framework for this. There's no context for this. He's not even a character who needs this. It's not like we need to be inside his head at this moment to know that he's going to be blown up. It's like, no. But the movie's like, we can cram that in there anyway.
So great, because like, yes, so by the way, if you haven't seen it yet, I think you should. I really think you should. And like, you would say spoilers, but once you start watching this movie, you know exactly what's going to happen. Like, there's no spoilers. This is a very simple movie, except for the parts that are really, really complicated, like what Darren mentioned. Our bad guy, who is uber capitalist gone wrong, Steve Jobs on steroids, possibly literally steroids, because every once in a while, his face and his arms turn dark with veiny, Akira energy, and he turns,
and like his voice starts to echo, like he sounds demonic and stuff, and like it's just not addressed.
It's just it's like they brought over Richard Armitage from shooting the 3rd season of Hannibal, and they're like, "You can still do that thing with your voice, right?" He's like, "Yeah, but what's my character motivation? I don't care. Just do the thing with the voice."
Yeah, and it's great. It's just so great.
Again, like, there are parts of it that I really, really like. I love the cartoonishness. I love the energy of it. I love, like, the actor who plays Jang, who I think is from, like, The Handmaiden, was her big break. And apologies, I'm going to mangle the pronunciation here, and I'm so sorry. It's Kim Tae-ri, and she's really good. And, like, again, the thing with, like, characters like Jang is that she's not a character so much as a mood. You take one look at her wearing sunglasses indoor with a smiley emoticon, red shirt, and a bomber jacket, and it's like, I understand what this character is, and I know what she's doing, and I know what the movie expects of her. And my problem is that, like, after that, you also get shoehorned in, by the way, she's also the only person who ever got close enough to Richard Armitage to point a gun in his face. Never mind that we're not really going to pay off that particular character setup or drama beat outside of him pulling a chemical weapon out of her tooth. Again, Richard Armitage shares one scene in which he's in the same physical space as the heroes, and that scene is not the climax of the movie. again, like, you know, I like the energy of it, but it feels like you probably should have taken several more passes at the script before you kind of committed to it.
Or
yes.
turned it into a series.
A miniseries, yes.
Yeah, like, because like, is there some kind of rule that this had to be a movie? Like, because I genuinely feel kind of disappointed in that this is what we got, because I did like that world. Like, I love that setup. I honestly am not as hard on like the character origins and their motivation. Like, I kind of, because that's very anime to me.
Very
the fact
anime.
That, yes, he had this very super depressing and dark scenario happen to him that defines him, but also he's like the most skilled version of whatever the hell he was doing before that. Like, that's anime out the ass.
And they're all on the same ship for some reason. It doesn't matter.
Right, like you basically have a super team and they don't even know it or whatever. Like, that's super anime, right? I'm perfectly fine with that aspect. Just tell me the story. Tell me all the little bits and pieces that make this make a little bit more sense, or at least allow me to enjoy it for more time, because I just ended up getting frustrated that they were kind of skipping over to this next beat. And I'm like, wait, what happened? What was going on with this situation? What happened? Like, did I miss something, or do we not know that his missing daughter is in space, alive or dead? Like, is that clear?
She's dead. It's very clear.
She is dead.
She's dead. He just wants to find her body to put her
okay,
to rest.
All right. Because I was very hazy. I'm like, is she still like alive in space for years?
No, it like I think KC, like, you have this exactly right, which is that this does live in this weird world in between what should be a movie and what should be a series, right? Where there is all of this vestigial information, if I can use a fancy word, that still is latched on there and is never addressed and is never dug into, which I could have spent just an entire episode on that wonderful barge city that they were on, like, which, you know, we get hallways of. I would love to know, like, how the economy works there. It's so neat. It's so fascinating. Yeah. But where was I going with this? Where I was going somewhere important with this. And but as a movie, what ends up happening is they take this big long character thing and then boomerang right back to the story when none of it was really needed. Like Darren said, a lot of the characterization, you understand who these people are by the shot. You know, we see the captain, we see her outfit, we see that she's drinking, and we see that she's good at her job. You don't need to know a goddamn thing else about this lady. But they give it to us anyway.
But don't worry, we have a sequence where Richard Armitage watches the biographies of these characters and realizes that the one who was a former drug kingpin is actually the most well-adjusted of the set. Like, and like, my problem isn't even that. My problem is that, like, the sequences that we do get, like the sequences that pad it out, because it's 2 hours and 18 minutes long, I believe. The sequences that pad it out are the ones that are the most arguably unnecessary and cliche. I'm thinking of all the stuff with Richard Armitage. We have an international star. We have the guy from The Hobbit. Stand back and marvel at our international production that we have here. I like Armitage a lot, I should be clear. But again, we have a guy from The Hobbit is pretty much what we're doing here. But all he does is, like, that thing that, like, evil CEOs have done in movies for generations. Sit at the desk while his underlings give a presentation, playing with a set of glasses ominously, letting him know that he's very disappointed, and also repeatedly constructing very elaborate, like, Jigsaw-esque, but extremely condensed Jigsaw-esque moral dilemmas in which he traps people in order to prove that they don't deserve a place in paradise. And it's like, but
so brilliant. Brilliant, Darren.
Okay. I think you could do something interesting with that, but probably the way to do it is to have that play out over, like, a little extended period of the movie, instead of, like, cutting back to him and going, shit, we got 2 minutes, we got to cram this entire character beat in there. So it's like, so hold on, we got the reporter who's cracked my secret plan to genocide mankind. Okay. We've also caught a terrorist. So how about I tell the reporter that if he shoots the terrorist, he can come to my secret paradise and live with the best of mankind after I've wiped out the world, and that'll be fantastic, and it'll be a big moral dilemma. Oops, he pulled the trigger, but it's okay, it was just a psych. Boom, got it, proved you're an animal, my point is validated. Woof. And it takes as long as it takes me to explain it for that to have happened. That's like,
but That's again the thing that I love about this movie. I'm legitimately going to rewatch this because I so much enjoyed it, by the way. For everyone wondering how I really feel about it. Because like it also does that very anime thing where it wears its social commentary on its sleeve. The hypocrisy of the corporate elite saying you've never met our rules, so you can't be good enough like us, even though they keep changing the rules. If only all the workers could unite, they could defeat all of the big bureaucrats. Oh, it's so great.
No, there's like a really great Paul Verhoeven movie in here. Like the premise of Space Sweepers alone is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And like, again, we've talked about it this long. I love that there's so much in the movie. We've talked this long and we haven't actually talked about why it's called Space Sweepers.
Exactly.
It is there's just so much else to talk about with the movie. The reason why it's called Space Sweepers is because they're a team of garbage men in space, which is brilliant. Like, it's a brilliant concept. Like, when I heard that concept, I was like, I am in. It's going to take a lot to push me back out. And 2 hours and 18 minutes later, the movie's like, see, we got you. And I'm like, fine, movie, you did. Okay, fine, you called my bluff. But like, the concept of like mankind having polluted not only the ecosphere in which they live, but like the amount of space above where they live. And to a point where like there will be jobs in the future where it will be people's function to take these incredibly high risk jobs, which, like most capitalism, is designed to get you further in debt so that you have to keep working in order to keep cleaning up after people who aren't going to pay you a fair wage to tidy up. Like, that is a brilliant premise for a movie. That is an absolutely amazing setup. And the movie does about 5 minutes of that. And then we're off on to the next thing. And like that's I think my kind of problem with Space Sweepers. And again, maybe I kind of hesitate to say maybe it is a cultural thing. Maybe it's like, maybe I'm just so conditioned to like Western blockbusters. I should say, like, I've watched anime. I watched a couple of anime. I watched like Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I really loved it. But maybe it's just a sensibility thing that I don't really click. Maybe I don't get the tonal whiplash. Maybe maybe I'm just slow, Jack. Maybe I'm just slow. Maybe I just like things to be just a little bit like, hey, Darren, we're gonna walk you through this just a little bit easier. Don't worry. We're going to have 2 scenes where the character explains his entire evil motivation and, constructs an elaborate moral dilemma in which to trap a side character who you're never going to see again. Maybe that's on me. Maybe
I don't think you should be so hard on yourself, Darren, because like, I'm going to keep reiterating this. The problem is that it's a movie. Like, there's no reason for this to be 2 hours and 15 minutes long. That's not enough time to tell the story that they clearly wanted to tell. Like, they should have given it more room to breathe, like you said earlier. And like, I do hope that they get a chance to do that at some point. Like, I don't know if this made money, like they sold it to Netflix. I don't know at what cost or whatnot, but I'm assuming people are watching it because it wasn't hard to find when I searched for it.
I want to say this was a relatively cheap movie. I want to say I read somewhere, and I don't know how accurate this is, that this had a budget of
$21.2 million, which is less than Mortal Kombat 1995 adjusted for inflation.
Yes, so like this is a relatively cheap movie that
and looks great. Like, it really does look great.
Looks fantastic. Well, and like not just in presentation, like the CG is very good, but also in like things like art direction. Their Babs, their robot friend, is a really interesting design. The way that
very expressive, very like it's actually able to communicate.
Like it can blush. Like...
No, and like just like the space that they inhabit, this like incredibly like working class, but also in space feeling, it's very Cowboy Bebop. It's very like we're living paycheck to paycheck, but we're also doing some badass shit, which is I guess maybe like to me the movie starts off with a spaceship race / battle where all of these different factions are fighting over a hunk of space junk. And, obviously it's just there to show off like how cool and competent our heroes are. But it was so awesome. It's something that we don't see a lot in American blockbusters. And I was there for it.
I just said that we should spend an entire movie watching on Fight Over Space Junk. Like,
Yes.
I would be there. I would be much like, I was like, at 5 minutes, I was like, I could see an entire movie of this working. And it's like, no, we're not just doing Guardians of the Galaxy. We're also going to do Monsters Inc. No, we're not doing Monsters Inc. We're also going to do Star Wars. And it's like, you know, or like, God forbid, we're even going to do Blade. There's going to be a rave sequence in here as well. And it's like, okay, you know, yeah, there is a rave. I actually really like the rave sequence. I think the rave sequence is really well put together. Like most of the movie is well put. The production design is fantastic. The direction is really, really good. You know, again, I think maybe either a tighter or a looser edit would probably work. Just something that either gives it room to breathe or strips out the parts of it that like clutter the narrative in the space.
Yeah, all the things that hint at the greater universe.
Yeah. So either give them room,
just get
or
rid
take
of it
them
then.
out. Yeah, pick one. Don't try and do both is the thing. But again, you know, maybe it's a sensibility thing. But like, it looks gorgeous. It's wonderfully directed. The special effects are fantastic. Even things like the use of lens flare, which you know, lens flare in science fiction is a bit overdone, but here it feels like very much like a stylistic sensibility. It's a choice. It's like, this is loud, and we don't just mean loud in the sense of the subwoofer. We mean loud as like a statement of purpose, and I admire that aspect of it. To be fair.
Absolutely. No, and I'm seeing in chat, I compared it to Cowboy Bebop only in aesthetics. Obviously, I'm not about to take on the legion of Cowboy Bebop enthusiasts. I love Cowboy Bebop, but it's like I said, living paycheck to paycheck while also being a badass. That's very Cowboy Bebop aesthetic. So, but you know, this also takes a lot story-wise from that very famous anime. You know, mysterious youngsters, catty female assassins, very standard tropey stuff as far as anime is concerned. I'm not a anime connoisseur, but I've watched enough to know enough. I guess I have to agree with both of you because you're both very correct. They were hopscotching across this line where they wanted to jam pack it full of so much information to make it a very real world that they put too much in. And if they would have just like, oh, this is going to be 5 hours, 1 hour long episodes where we get to dive into all these neat little aspects, that would have been fantastic. Or you can take the current cut of the movie, cut out 15, 20 minutes and make it really tight and easy. And they didn't choose a path because it's Netflix and they don't have to.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it was originally meant to be released in cinemas in South Korea, and obviously that didn't happen for, you know, reasons.
Do you have Corona in the corners of your house? Like,
what? Can't talk right now.
Like the coronavirus is just right there going, don't say it. Don't say it, Darren.
That's the deal, Darren. I don't bother it. It doesn't bother me. We're fine.
But I guess for all we're talking about it, if anyone out there is an anime fan, if you have watched Cowboy Bebop and really enjoyed it, this is absolutely for you because one, you will be mentally prepared for the far too long character exposition sequences. You will be there for the bad guy who has superpowers that are never explained, and he's super evil for not really the best reasons, but it doesn't matter because he's super evil.
And he gets introspective in his final 10 seconds of life. Like it's like part of me was waiting for a moment where like, was his final statement going to be, "I've wasted my life. I should have learned piano." I never learned what the two dogs looking at each other represented in that painting. It's like, I wish I'd learned Italian.
I kind of disagree that like the anime-ness of it isn't in like the hokiness of the characters. It's more so in like the feel, the energy, aesthetic, like that big bombastic spacing that you guys said that you love. Like that is super anime. Like they spend tons of time animating sequences that look just like that, and it's super impressive that you're seeing it like in live action. Like that's like anime brought to life. Like that's why it triggered that thing in my head that made me say, oh, this is like super cool, super, you know, energetic. But then everything around it just felt like, you know, cut and pasted. And so that's where I got let down. Because like if this had been an anime where like maybe had like, you know, a 12, 24 episode runtime, I think it would have been something that stuck with a lot of people for an extended period of time, because like I do think that world is super interesting. Like they could have gone into the depths of the super polluted Earth. They could have gone into like that big giant space station and like how the economy works there, because like apparently like there's no plants, like that's a big deal. Like there's like nano machines. There's
by the way, there are nano machines everywhere. Apparently, never fully
there's
explained.
a cloud of indestructible nano machines
and they
in
could
space.
kill you. Yeah, and they could kill you.
That's right.
Why is that a thing?
Yeah,
who knows?
It's very important. I'm really glad that you brought this up, because this is going to be important later, right? I don't know.
No, they fly into a giant cosmic cloud of killer nanobots. Yeah. We don't know why they're there. We don't know where they came from. There's nanomachines everywhere. Oh my god, I forgot about the nanomachines.
There's so much going on. To be fair, to give the movie credit, it does do things like, it does set up things like that, and it does do things like kind of set up the like Tiger's kind of like hand chopping thing. Like that's what passes for a character arc, where it's like he has a scene early on where he insists that he chops off people's hands, and somebody's like, "Do you really chop off people's hands?" And at the climax, guess what happens? He's in a situation where it'd be really useful if he could just chop off someone's hand, and he does.
Beautiful.
I feel like that's the perfect level of kind of like plot development for the movie. I don't need to know that he was like a drug kingpin beforehand. I don't need to know that he fled.
Not just a drug kingpin. He was only a drug kingpin because he used the money to like fund local orphanages or something. Because everyone is not only the best, but also like lawful good. Yeah. Even though he's a drug kingpin, he was doing it for a good reason. Even though you used to be a soldier, you switched sides, but you were the best.
The moment
soldier.
You saw a kid, the first time you saw a child.
Oh, I love this movie so much. It's because it's so much, and I think there's also a very real part of me. Darren and I talked a lot about this when we talked about The Expanse, which is like new IP, new ideas, things that are not just another Star Trek, things that are like original pieces of sci-fi. We don't get a ton of that. And so, and usually, at least American-made sci-fi that we get, I'm a huge sci-fi junkie, so the American sci-fi we get is like very dark and introspective, and it's gravity, and it's people alone in space, and you're like, I don't want this.
Brad Pitt's dad stuff, Dad Astra. Did it make you sad Astra, or were you mad Astra? I thought it was personally quite rad Astra, if you ask me myself.
Or Chris Pratt being a creeper in space. It's like introspective, boring space shit. And this,
they did all of their like super bombastic space stuff in the 80s. Now they've grown up.
Yes.
Now they want you to think about space, like really think about it.
I would argue that like the problem with Passengers is that nobody thought about anything. There's no introspection going on there whatsoever.
Touche. But like this is the kind of sci-fi that I want, where it is big and loud and fat. It's an action movie in space, and it utilizes the CG elements, and it utilizes the character elements. And it's what I want more of. And so just like, oh, here's a new thing. This isn't based on a book. This isn't based on a cartoon. It's a new thing. How exciting, you know?
I didn't know there were new things.
Yeah, I was genuinely shocked that it didn't come from something else, because it felt exactly like that. Like it felt like this is a better story than this movie is telling me it is. Like that. So I mean, maybe I'll go read those comic books that they released, because they came about to basically be companions to the movie. They just happen to come out first, I think. So I don't know if it retells that story or if it actually has additional information in them. So I may try to dig into that.
Yeah, it could be neat.
You may find some space in your schedule for it now.
Son of a bitch. Beautiful. Just beautiful.
It's a nice cap.
That's where we need to wrap up. Absolutely. We got to wrap up.
I won't have anybody trashing my puns.
We're gonna sweep it up later. Don't you worry. We'll sweep it under the rug. We have to wrap up because Casey has another live stream to do in 10 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Because right after this live stream, Nick does his editor's hour live stream. Casey, you're gonna be there for it, right?
Yeah, he's gonna be playing Resident Evil 2 some more. So
Perfect.
Resident Evil 2 as well.
So you can hop over to the Escapist video game channel and just see more live stuff if you have the time in your day. Come on, we all got the time. Let's be honest. A 21st century Fifth Element. Oh, I love the Fifth Element. So
Fifth Element's great.
Fifth Element is much better than Space Sweepers. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm not gonna let you compare those things without saying those words.
I agree with you 100%. But in an era where everything is owned by Disney, it's so lovely to see something on the scale not owned by Disney. Is I guess where I'm gonna
not
end.
Yet. Not owned by Disney.
Yeah,
yet.
I'm about to say, Jack jumps forward 10 years in time, and it's the Space Sweepers, the newest entry in the MCU. It's like, damn it.
But I'll be there. I'll watch it. In any case, thank you all so much for coming and listening to us. Mortal Kombat 95. Go watch it. Space Sweepers. Go watch it. You got a Netflix account. You got 2.5 hours. Just go watch it. It's great times. And once again, I've been Jack Packard.
I've been Darren Mooney.
I've been KC Wosu.
And that's it. I even have our end credits working this week, so Nick won't yell at me after the podcast. How fun is that? Are you ready for it? Boom. I just clicked him right there. You can still hear us though.
Oh,
Really?
okay.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I don't know if they want.
I almost started talking trash about.
don't do it.
That was a joke.
I have some very hot opinions.